just confirming my microphone.
And make sure it's Tessa, not Fran today.
Good morning. We're going to start in about 30 seconds.
Yeah, and honestly, I mean, just so you know, I think part of what my opinion was, which I may not, I don't know how much longer I'll be chair of the committee, but is that with respect.
Oh, good morning.
Ballot measure is, right?
Good morning. And I'll use my SANDAG bike bell to call the meeting to order. Good morning and welcome to the October 18th, 2024 Transportation Committee meeting. I'll call the meeting to order. First, I would like to ask our interpreter to explain how to access interpretation. Please go ahead.
Good morning. This is an announcement by the interpreter. To use the interpretation feature, please scroll to the bottom of the Zoom screen where the meeting controls are. Click on the interpretation icon, the world, and select English as your language. If you are joining through the Zoom mobile app, through a cell phone, tablet, etc., please press the ellipsis, the 3 consecutive dots, then interpretation, and then choose your language. Finally, click on mute original audio to not hear the original Spanish low in the background. Headsets are available for interpretation if you are in the meeting room, so please check out a headset from the receptionist at the lobby. Aviso por parte del intérprete. Para hacer uso del servicio de interpretación, favor de desplazarse a la parte inferior de la pantalla de Zoom, donde aparecen los controles. Haga clic en el icono de interpretación o el globo terráqueo y seleccione Spanish, español. Si está utilizando la aplicación móvil de Zoom por medio de su celular, tableta, etcétera, presione los puntos suspensivos. Luego interpretación y luego el idioma. Si no desea escuchar el audio original en inglés en el fondo, por favor seleccione Mute Original Audio, silenciar audio original. Contamos con auriculares disponibles para el servicio de interpretación. Si se encuentra en la sala de reunión, favor de pedir auriculares con la recepcionista en el vestíbulo. Gracias.
Thank you. I would like to take a moment to acknowledge the land that we call home. The tribal nations of the San Diego region has historically been faced injustice. We acknowledge the harmony that exists between the land, nature, and the original peoples who have since endured displacement, persecution, and systemic oppression. We pay our respect to the unceded territory and the homelands of 18 tribal nations in our region, the most in any county in the United States. From the cultural groups of the Kumeyaay, the Wengo, and the Sueño, Cupeño, and Cahuilla. This land has nourished, healed, protected, and embraced them with for many generations in a relationship of balance and harmony. As members of the SANDAG community, we acknowledge this legacy. We aspire to learn from the indigenous traditional knowledge and experiences in undoing the injustice of the past. So please now join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Tesla, do we have a quorum? Can you confirm that we have a quorum?
Good morning, Chair and members of the committee. I can confirm a quorum for today's meeting, and I would also like to let the members know that Councilmember Campillo for the City of San Diego will be participating remotely today. If Councilmember Campillo, if you could confirm your reason without giving any medical details as to why you would like to participate remotely, please.
Yes, thank you. It's for caregiving of family members, so particularly my child.
Thank you. That reason does meet the legal requirements for remote participation. Please confirm that you can leave your camera on for the entire meeting and only mute when you are not speaking.
I will leave the camera on and mute only when I am not speaking.
And can you confirm whether or not there is anybody 18 or over in the room with you? And if so, describe their relationship to you.
There's no one over 18.
And Chair, and going forward, all votes will need to be taken on a roll call basis. This member does not count to quorum, but I do confirm a quorum here in person.
Thank you. That's
I'm sorry, I will need to do a roll call for quorum.
Great. Go
Excuse
ahead.
me. San Diego County Regional Airport Authority is absent. City of San Diego, Councilmember Campillo.
Here.
County of San Diego Supervisor Montgomery Stepp. Here. East County Chair Shu.
here.
MTS Councilmember Moreno.
Present.
North County Coastal Councilmember Zito.
Present.
North County Inland Councilmember Musgrove.
Here.
North County Transit District Deputy Mayor Edson.
Present.
And both Port of San Diego and South County are absent. And I'd also like to note that both Caltrans Roy Abood and Southern California Tribal Chairmen's Association Chairman Pinto are both present for advisory members. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Tessa. Moving on to item number 1, we'll do non-agendized public and member comments. As a reminder, no comments shall be loud, threatening, profane, or abusive language that disrupts the orderly conduct of the meeting will be tolerated. Any such language or any other disorderly conduct that disrupts, disturbs, or otherwise impede the orderly conduct of the meeting is prohibited. Per board policy, the amount of time allowed for each verbal public comment is determined based on the number of agenda items, the complexity of those items, and the number of persons anticipated to offer comments. This allows us to hear from as many people as possible and to complete the business while we still have a quorum. Based on those factors, today's meeting, each member of the public will have 2 minutes for their comments. So Tesla, can you go ahead and proceed with the public comments for item number 1?
Thank you, Chair. We have 2 public commenters on non-agenda public comments. Robert Gurman, please come to the podium. You'll be followed by Blair Beekman.
Morning. Okay, we're going to give this a shot. I have a slideshow and I'm supposed to hit that. And then I'm supposed to hit this. And I think,
I'm sorry, sir. I did not realize you had something to show. You have not been promoted to a panelist to be able to show your screen.
I can't do, okay. I didn't understand what you said, but okay. You're the boss. I also brought it in paperwork form. I sent it to the clerk. I'm trying to send it to Zoom. I've had problems with this before. I went to Verizon. They showed me how to do it. And so I didn't know that I needed to show it to you before. But did you receive anything? I'm wasting my time. But
Thank you. My deputy clerk is coming to take your hard copy from you. And
I have some hard copies. You can pass them out.
you just need
Basically,
one.
they're self-explanatory, and it's about the San Diego County Region or San Diego County Regional Airport Authority, and the business plan that they have is for San Diego County is focused on the blueprint is the Minneapolis-St. Paul airport system called the MAC, and because our airport is so small, the Lindbergh, they are farming out or pushing out aircraft to the reliever airports out in our community. And Carlsbad right now, who is on the news, is a perfect example of what's going on. Basically, it's a self-dealing, self-serving system that the San Diego Regional Airport Authority is doing. They only want to take care of the convention center and the people downtown. They do not have the citizens nor our communities in their best interests. That's their focus. And that is the main reason why they need to come back under the authority, jurisdiction, whatever you want to call it, of SANDAG, because you guys represent our transportation system for our citizens. Tourists are in there, sure, they got to travel around. Downtown is in there, but they only have a small section. And the plan that they have, like I said, and a perfect example is Carlsbad. And Carlsbad does not want to expand their airport for jets, for domestic travel. They don't mind having a little local airport the way it was initiated. So that's what my public comment is. And one of these times I get up here, I'm going to do this right. I swear I will. Okay, thank you very much.
Our next commenter, Blair Beekman, please go ahead.
Hi, thank you. Blair Beekman, thanks for the meeting today. Thanks for the previous public comment and some nice ideas there. And thanks for allowing 2 minutes for public comment, non-agenda public comment. I guess it's my time to just thank you for the persons at SANDAG that with the beginning of war in Israel and the Mideast or the near West, Near East in last year in October, there was a big push by people for their local cities to create ceasefire resolutions and for their city governments. That was kind of rebuffed a bit. Some did, some didn't. But what I came out of that time was the idea that our local politicians and officials and elected persons can work internally to really develop the concepts of peace here at the local level and defend peace and really work towards peace. We're going to get a lot of projects and ideas shipped to us now that are going to be based on war, basically, and we're going to slowly be drifting into practices more and more of war. We're going to keep things secretive, hidden from our public, in order of the name of national security. And that's not the way to work. If we practice openness and accountability, that's working towards peace and open democracy. And that's actually fighting war. That's saying no to war and then giving the world good examples how to build towards peace. I think it's really important stuff to work towards. And I learned those lessons here at SANDAG, and I can't thank you enough for that. I think it's a really good system that I think yourselves want to work towards, that I hope this can be a time to remind yourselves how to work towards those good things. I try to work towards it with ideas of openness and accountability. I think yourselves have other ideas. Let's hope we can bring ourselves together and talk about those good ideas of peace here at the local level. We can fight war. We can ask to end war and ask for negotiation and dialogue.
Thank you. Your time expired. That concludes the non-agenda public comments.
Thank you, Tesla. Mario, any updates from SANDAG?
Sure, thank you. I have several updates. I think first of all, I want to thank the community in Caltrans. There was an incredible event this weekend with the closure of the 43rd Street ramps in 805. That was a great community event. The Caltrans was able to do their maintenance and also leave some sections open where the community could bike, walk, and look at different services that were being presented. So it was incredible community day. SANDAG hosted the community bike ride there, and it was a great success. We will be coming on November 15th to the board. An update on I think it's to TC, I think first, on the 15th on the transit to the airport study. So that's moving along. We will be having surveys beginning October 23rd, but the update will be coming in. Antoinette and her team will just bring up where we are, what are some of the options they're looking, and pretty much landing it into some more reality ideas. On the Lawson realignment, I'm very happy that we have finalized the technical work or the engagements with all the interested parties on the value analysis. Now the teams are gathering the information, and we should be coming within a month, reconvening the group and trying to home in into those alternatives that are going to be presented to the board of directors. Regarding the stabilization of the bluffs, we just finished a full closure, what's called absolute work window last week, and we continue working on it. I think on 125, there's a lot of news, and the next board meeting is probably going to be almost fully dedicated to it, between OIPA reports and in different discussions. In those discussions, the board did ask us to pass the motion to come in. First, last board meeting, the board approved a budget to move with the project initiation and pre-analysis of the environmental work to look at what it would take to relinquish the route back to Caltrans. So funds were approved for that. So that's going to start. But the board also directed us to come back with the different alternatives of how soon could we pay it off? This has come to the board several times, but as we keep moving with it, we get more direction also on back office and different things. So we'll be coming in with a broad picture of where we see the finances, where we could see a potential understanding with the state for the convening or passing on the route and shutting it down for toll collections. And in big picture, how would that look with the managed lane system that is being proposed in the regional transportation plan? That we did also announce that on the 125, which is very important, talking about the RTP, is that we modeled it. And the preliminary model runs tells us that we're in compliance with greenhouse emissions and vehicle miles travel. If we take out the tolls, that is basically the first major requirement that would allow us to proceed with relinquishing the route to the state. So that's huge. Now, that has an impact. If we take out the tolls, there's going to be a little bit more traffic on the 125, and that's understandable. It will help the 805 a little bit also, but it also affects revenues. So some projects in the future RTP may have to be delayed, but that's just part of how we're all working towards this. So that's a very important feature. And talking about the regional plan, the team and planning led by Antoinette are working on what I just said, the balancing of the cost, the revenues, and the projects that are being proposed. Our model runs are looking good for the 19% target for greenhouse emissions. I know Chair has said we need to go bigger and try to do better than that. We are having also discussions. The 4 major MPOs and other MPOs in the states have begun discussions with different state agencies, among them CARB, because they're going to start resetting their targets for SB 375. So we have begun conversations on what those targets should look like or how they get set up. At no time that's being paused of the targets themselves. What we asked them was to pause the setting targets until they have a robust conversations with the locals here. On the purple line, the team is working on the feasibility study. It is a very complicated project. It's very expensive, and the team is looking into how they can either stage it or look at alternatives that could lower the cost of that project. But one thing that is a clear reality, that project is a long lead project, a rail solution on the purple line. So we need to also be thinking of near-term solutions. So we are also pursuing in parallel rapid routes that could service that area of the community. Now, rapid routes sounds pretty cool and pretty jazzy, but the thing is, those rapid routes need to function. So we need to be, as a group, laser focused also on the 805 HOV conversions to manage lanes. So we need to be laser focused on that project and put that mile marker also as switch on, switch off with the 125. So start thinking that way. Let's start thinking big picture in the region here. We just got word from the federal government that we were not successful on a grant application that was submitted for the 15805 managed lane connection. So that tells us that we need to redirect all our efforts to the 805 South managed lanes, make them a reality, extend them as possible, realize the financing plan, and then also start moving forward with that connection to the 15. This connects with the rapids that the teams are looking. Rapids aren't going to work if we don't have highways that's allowing them to free flow. So that's how we need to connect. In a similar manner, 78, I know there's a lot of buzz. 78 is moving forward. So if somebody's saying that we're not doing anything on 78, I think we need to have more conversations and more briefings. We have 3 environmental documents moving forward on 78. 1578 is going to be finalized, the draft, and released early next year. That's a $400 million project, and it's adding managed lanes and direct connectors to the 78. It will be connecting with a shop project that Caltrans is going to start next year and doing some bridge expansion and some rehabilitation. We have started the Central 78 environmental document. It's going to be about 5 years for that document. And we have also began the I-578 environmental document that's going to take about 4 years to realize. Those are documents that are fully funded, and they're not $1 million studies. They're $50 million studies each. So just so you start getting an idea how we're moving forward with that. But in that corridor, we do need to be laser focused that there's going to be an expansion on the I-5 HOV lanes from 78 to Oceanside. That's moving forward. That's being designed. The design has been fully funded also. And now we need to be laser focused on getting also the construction dollars for that so that can seamlessly move forward. And finally, we will be traveling with some of the board members next week, or the first part of next week, to Mexico City with the chamber trip. We have several meetings lined up with the new federal Mexican administration to hopefully we can move it forward some very important border issues and projects. That concludes my report. Thank you.
Thank you, Mario. Any questions or other comments from board members? Any other reports? Oh, Councilmember Musgrove, go ahead.
Thank you, Roy. Real quickly, you did mention the 7815. Is there any movement on discussions with Riverside on that transit option to move people from north of the border, the county line, to the University Kaiser Hospital area? Thank you.
Yeah, we're just getting started planning that route, and we will be partnering up with Riverside. They'll be part of our project development team on that.
But so that's less contingent on what we discussed today, because that's just a matter of making the connections. Is that a fair estimate? I mean, it would require the buses, I get that, and some routing, but it's not wholly contingent on funding per se.
A little bit contingent. I mean, but the 78 I-15 work is moving forward, like Mario mentioned. So as part of that, we will start the planning in the next few months on that. And we've already reached out to Riverside and North County Transit and the University of Palomar and San Marcos. They're both super excited about the potential.
I can imagine. And Mario, to your point, Mayor Jones and I make a very concerted effort when people ask about that to effectively what you just said. The environmentals are complete. This is what we're looking at. You'll start seeing progress on it sometime next year. It's not an overnight project, but it will happen. So trying to relay.
And the good thing is Caltrans is also starting the shop rehabilitation on the 78 entire corridor, and they're also lining in some bridge widening that it's needed, but it's going to connect there.
Okay, thank you. Thank you again, Roy.
Caltrans, right?
I just want to say thank you, Mario. You brought up the 43rd Street 805 closure. It was a great event, very spawned by the community, and we hope to continue to work on having more events to match up with our maintenance efforts. So thank you for mentioning that. Also want to mention that there was a San Marcos Creek ribbon cutting where Caltrans worked with the community to open that creek project, which was really exciting, which I believe was the day before that event. So we had a pretty good weekend last weekend with some activity. But on a different note, on November 1st, we will start a 56-hour closure of 52 eastbound. So it'll be between the 805 and Convoy. So I just want to give everyone a heads up about that. There'll be a detour bringing you down to either I-8, or if you want to use the 163 to come back up, those will be the two detours that will be available. And it's going to help with the dip work that we're doing there. So they'll be paving over and hopefully getting that project closer to completion. It's currently slated for March to be fully open, and all construction done. So that'll also align with the work that we're doing on the Ox Lane further east on the 52. So hopefully mid next year, the construction will all be complete. So that's my update. Thank you.
Roy, I think you guys are also doing a temporary closure of a small section of 905 this Sunday. So I don't know if you had any information
I'll
on
get
it.
that for you
Yeah.
guys.
Okay, got it. Thank
Yeah,
you.
this was the big one though, so we just want to share. Thank you.
Any other member comments? Yes.
Yeah, thanks, Chair.
Peter.
Probably not a surprise, but let's have a few more comments about cycling infrastructure since it's me. This was prompted by a couple of things, one of which is being that in my last ride down to SANDAG from Solana Beach, I noticed on Gilman Drive under the I-5 overpass, some new infrastructure was put in place, recently installed. This included refreshed markings and green paint to show cyclists where to position as they go through this area. Awesome. It makes it better. But it also included disturbingly poor implementation of small curbs and plastic bollards that are just like a very small run, not connected to anything else. It's just there. The other item to note related to this, which connects these pieces together, are on October 5th, a very experienced cyclist was put in the hospital with multiple rib fractures and a minor brain bleed because he accidentally ran into the curb stops and bollards that are on 101 through Cardiff. Then on October 12th, another cyclist was killed in a solo accident on Jimmy Durante Boulevard in Del Mar and was found on the ground immediately after the first in a series of bollards on the road. And the sheriff's conclusion is he lost control of his bike. It doesn't take very much brain power to realize that he probably was surprised by this plastic pole in the middle of the road that popped up out of nowhere. This means that in 2024 alone, we've had 2 deaths and another 2 serious hospitalizations from this type of infrastructure in just Jimmy Durante Boulevard in Del Mar and on 101 through Cardiff and Encinitas. This is not acceptable. When I talk to people about this and when we rapidly implement this type of infrastructure, sometimes you hear comments like people need to just get used to it. They'll get used to it. This will go away eventually. And this will attract less confident cyclists to start riding our roads. The former doesn't sound like Vision Zero mentality to me. I'd be interested to know people's opinion about how many deaths are worth a few more riders on the road, maybe. And then I can assure you no nervous rider is going to start suddenly riding and biking somewhere because we put in 100 feet of curb stops and bollards. It's just not going to happen. Having said this, I will state that SANDAG seems to generally do a very good job with our infrastructure. I hear lots of comments about how expensive this is, about how long it takes, but that's what it is when we're putting obstacles in the road that can seriously harm or kill people. It does take that. A great example of an excellent facility is the separation done on Santa Fe Road connecting Rose Canyon and Rose Creek bike paths. Another solid implementation is the 4th and 5th Street bike lanes right outside this building. However, in our cities and other areas, there are too many examples of rushed and poor implementations. The recent addition to Regents Road, which has already seriously hurt a cyclist this year in a solo crash, is an example of a rushed bad implementation that should not be there. The new one on Gilman with these curb stops and bollards is another one that will not add a single rider to our roads, but is guaranteed to harm someone eventually. Someone's going to run into that and crash. So I'm just bringing this up and asking us that as in our jurisdictions, in our cities, in our county, that when we look at doing this type of implementation, please make sure that you're involving people like myself that ride these roads regularly and understand what a proper design is and how to do this correctly, and try to do it in a way that's not going to take out riders. I mean, I hear, again, lots of comments about, well, these are just the sports cyclists. Well, one, I can guarantee you it's just not the sports cyclists. The accidents I just mentioned, 3 of the 4 were not sports cyclists. And 2, why do we discriminate against sports cyclists? They are users of our road and they should feel safe too. So I would just encourage us to, slow some of this down a little bit and make sure it's done right. And again, kudos to a lot of the infrastructure that SANDAG's put out there because it is being done right, and try to not have so many accidents and or deaths in the near future. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? Well, Councilman Zito, I'll ditto your comment by saying I had an accident as I was riding home one time on a brand new bike lane area. near Balboa Park. I attributed that to operator error, but I must say what I really hit was one of those new curb areas that was put in, and it forced me to make a right angle turn, which I didn't really like to do on a bike. So I went sideways and lost the wheel when another being went down. So I certainly concur with you that sometimes we put in these so-called improvements, but it makes it harder for at least some riders like me. And I'll just say that for me, I took that and just said it was operator error because I either wasn't going slow enough or maybe I should have got off my bike and walked. But anyway, thank you for those comments. Any other member comments?
Can I just address,
Yes,
Mario,
right.
for the closure for the 905? It's a permit closure, so I didn't have it in my notes, but it's on the 20th. There'll be a full closure between La Media and 805. So just to give you an update on that. It's a permit that's on Sunday.
Yeah, and I know you guys are coordinated with the CBX facilities and others, but we just want to make sure people get their flights, right, if they're using that facility.
Yes, yeah, so thank you.
John, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I would just say the topic of the 78 came up at our board meeting yesterday. I appreciate the fact that under your leadership, Mario, the 78 has come back up to the forefront. I would say that from my perspective, I don't think the previous administration did a very good job of putting that at the forefront of our priorities. And so I appreciate you putting that out there. The 78 corridor connection to the 15 is of chief importance to NCTD, has been for a long time. In addition to the Sprinter Rail corridor, I think we want to see bus on shoulder or bus and HOV lane along 78. That should have been done probably a decade ago. And the reality is we've missed out on an opportunity over the past decade to connect with bus and rail in the 15 corridor because of our pushing the 78 corridor off to the side. So we talked about it yesterday at our board meeting, and I did make mention that I appreciate that. I trust that under your leadership, the 78 is going to rise to the top of the list and make its way into what we need for projects. So I appreciate you mentioning that today.
See no other hands up, but I read a news report from MTS. Mike, can you make a quick announcement of what your MTS board acted on yesterday with regards to trying to recover some fare revenues?
Right. So thank you very much. The newest update with the fare ordinance is the option to pay on the spot if you're found on board the trolley or the system without fare. Will be a lot of education between now and February 1st, but that option will eventually go away. And the fine has been increased to $25. So, but there'll be a lot of education to get our customers ready for that and prepared for that.
So we've gone back and forth. I mean, there was a period in which MTS had that policy, and then we changed for various reasons. One of them was finding that many people were ignoring the citations and had hundreds of dollars of fines and court costs.
Correct. As part of our diversion program that we implemented, I think it was about 4 years ago, we made that change to try to help out. But it's pretty clear that there's, with the new fare system with Pronto, that people are taking full advantage of, stored value and not tapping until they're on board. So the board's direction was to make that change.
Great. Thank you for the update, Mike. Oh, Supervisor Montgomery said.
Thank you so much, Chair Shu. I just want to add to the MTS discussion around on the spot fare tapping. There will be a waiver that riders can proactively ask for if this is their first time violating. We found that at least 95,000 taps were first time. And so what we don't want to do, I think as a board, based on the vote yesterday, this was an addition, an amendment to the recommendation to have that first time waiver. Our ridership is creeping back up. This has been a very convenient system, the Pronto system, and the changes that we have made. So we're just trying to make a balance between, a culture of folks knowing that they have to pay, but also making room for still getting used to the system. and all types of other things that can happen, improving our infrastructure on the line. So, which MTS has done a great job of so far. We really have been going back and forth and exploring this because we don't want in the next year to be in the same situation we were in 4 years ago when people were coming to us. SDSU had done a study where they interviewed a lot of folks who were have been unsheltered and trying to get housing, and these citations were impacting their ability to move forward with life. So at the Public Security Committee, which I'm also chair of, we are discussing sort of a hybrid enforcement system where we use both the criminal citations that could eventually end up to be on your record criminally for those who are continuing to violate, but we will also, based on the committee's and recommendation and the board's approval, have a civil administrative process as well. So I just want to add that to the conversation.
Thank you, Supervisor. And we'll probably cover this topic a little bit more and one of the other items later on today's agenda. Mario, I have just a quick question. For those projects that you mentioned in North County on 78, as we go forward with these projects, how do they affect the overall VMT? And I know maybe the jargon is VMT addition, neutral. Maybe you can answer in that quick way without getting into details.
It's going to be a twofold answer. I'll let Antoinette answer it on the RTP, and then I'll go project specific.
So my answer is the same as it was the last time we had this conversation. When you do add vehicle capacity, it does increase VMT, but the type of capacity that we're adding is to encourage higher occupancy modes and transit. So it's managed lanes and not general purpose lanes. And that allows us to operate reliable, rapid transit in the corridor. And it also allows us to expand our van pool program in the region and provide people with more choices than driving alone.
For the 7815 connector, which is the one closest right now, we have asked Caltrans to sit down and look at the BMT mitigation that's being proposed. Right now, the proposed mitigation, give or take, in a draft format is $6 million a year with a $40 million deposit upfront for buses and this and that. And then sustaining that is $6 million a year. That may not be sustainable from this agency's perspective based on our cash flows and based on the revenue calculated by the managed lane. So we have asked Caltrans to sit down and let's look at what we can really accomplish based on the revenues that are being forecasted with that managed lane, and then let's pair her out there and let's make it happen. So we're in that process of looking at what would be the BNT mitigation in the project-specific environmental document for 1578.
Great, thank you. And I don't want to get too much into the weeds of this since we're just dealing with general comments and reports. But I just want to draw a picture of our challenges of trying to reduce VMT when we're actually moving forward with projects that may be changing behavior, but may not necessarily reducing VMT overall. And I think that's the challenge that we're going to be facing as we go forward. Actually, it's the same challenge we were facing 10, 15 years ago, and we're going on with hopefully better plans in the future. With that, let's go on to the consent calendar. For the consent calendar, let me first take any public comments for the consent calendar.
Thank you, Chair. I have one public commenter on the consent agenda. Blair Beekman, please go ahead.
Hi, Blair Beekman. I wanted to comment on all the good conversation had on the previous item. It was nice to hear. Thank you. That is all. Thank you.
That concludes the public comments.
Thank you, Blair. Do any members want to pull an item, or if not, I'll entertain a motion to approve the consent calendar.
Zito moves approval.
Zito.
Edson second.
And Edson second. Let's go ahead and vote. We'll have to take a roll call vote. Is that right?
Yes, Chair, I'll need to do a roll call vote, but also please use your clickers to mark your vote. The Airport Authority is absent. City of San Diego, Councilmember Campillo.
Yes.
County of San Diego Supervisor Montgomery Stepp.
Yes.
East County Chair Shu.
Yes.
MTS Councilmember Moreno.
Moreno, yes.
North County Coastal Councilmember Zito.
Zito, yes.
North County Inland Councilmember Musgrove.
Aye.
NCTD Deputy Mayor Edson.
Edson, yes.
Port of San Diego and South County are absent. And that motion passes unanimously with those members present.
Thank you, Tessa. Let's move on to the first item, and we'll take staff report from Godi and Stacy on update on the Smart Growth Incentive Programs.
Good morning, Chair Shu. My name is Goldie Herbon. I'm the program manager of the Smart Growth Incentive Program. I'm joined today with my colleague Stacy Cooper to go over the Smart Growth Incentive Program Cycle 6 call for projects. And we are seeking your recommendation to the board to release this call. Just as a quick reminder, this item has gone to you before in July of this year, where we came to you with the evaluation criteria for this cycle. But before we dive into the main content of this presentation, I just want to give you a brief programmatic overview. So the Smart Growth Incentive Program is a competitive grant program that's funded exclusively by the Transnet Extension Ordinance. The program funds transportation-related planning and infrastructure projects that support smart growth development. And smart growth refers to a development pattern that focuses on future growth and infill development in areas near jobs, services, and public amenities that facilitates mixed-use transit-oriented development, which therefore increases housing and transportation choices. SANDAG has held 5 cycles or rounds of funding to date. The first one, Cycle 1, was in 2009, and the latest one, Cycle 5, was held in 2022. The cycle numbers and their associated award amounts are on the bar chart on the left. And on the right, you can see a pie chart showing all of the investment thus far, which is total $59.7 million. And as you can see, a majority of that has gone to capital construction projects. To date, the Smart Growth Incentive Program has funded more than 70 planning and construction projects. Additionally, the projects that have been awarded have also leveraged an additional $47 million, bringing the regional total investment into smart growth projects to just over $100 million. On this slide, you can see photos of successful Smart Growth Incentive Program construction projects. From the city of Chula Vista, you can see their 3rd Avenue Streetscape Implementation Project. On the top right is San Marcos's Armorlight Complete Street Corridor. The bottom left is Lemon Grove's Trolley Plaza, and on the bottom right is the city of San Diego's Downtown Wayfinding Signage Project. A couple other notable construction type projects for smart growth include traffic calming infrastructure, pedestrian promenades, or improvements to curbs, gutters, and sidewalks. Past planning projects have featured innovative financing mechanisms, mixed use and commercial corridor plans, in addition to complete street design manuals. Now I'll hand it over to Stacy, and she'll talk about the development of the call for projects.
Thank you, Goldie. Good morning, committee members. So this slide shows the timeline of stakeholder engagement that helped us develop the Cycle 6 call for projects. Last November, we held a listening session with local jurisdiction staff. From June through September, we brought the draft evaluation criteria to the Sustainable Communities, Mobility, and Social Equity Working Groups, the Transportation Committee, Climate Action Task Force, and the Regional Planning Committee for discussion and feedback. At the listening session with jurisdiction staff, we gauged interest in Cycle 6 and learned about staff capacity, barriers, and ways SANDAG could help address these barriers. Feedback received from the working groups and policy advisory committees included raising the maximum awards, a greater consideration for equity and investing in underserved communities, reducing the administrative burden on applicants, and funding projects in descending order without consideration for the number of projects an applicant could receive. In July 2023, the Transportation Committee, all of you, requested several changes to be made on how we conduct all of our call for projects, which are summarized on this slide. These changes, sorry, I accidentally went back. These changes provide greater transparency to the process and distribute funding more broadly across the region. In response to the feedback we received through stakeholder engagement, other changes were made, including increasing maximum project awards. For planning projects, we increased it from 500,000 to 1 million, and for capital projects from 2.5 million to 3.5 million. Enhancing the community engagement criteria to prioritize projects that are community-led, include underserved and limited English proficiency populations, and provide a meaningful role for community throughout the project lifespan. Reducing the administrative burden for applicants by simplifying the application to include more quantitative questions and providing technical assistance to all applicants during the application period. And allowing jurisdictions with an adapted climate action plan to receive funding for monitoring and implementation efforts that align with SGIP principles and the 2021 Regional Plan Environmental Impact Report. Now on to eligibility. So previous SGIP cycles only funded projects within geographically restricted smart growth opportunity areas, or SGOAs. And those location and extent of SGOAs were defined by each regional plan. To provide greater flexibility and fewer restrictions on where SGIP funds can be invested, we're proposing to remove geographic boundaries from the eligibility criteria. Instead, projects would need to further smart growth principles and goals and objectives of the 2021 Regional Plan and Sustainable Community Strategy. With the adoption of the 2021 Regional Plan and GHG Mitigation Measure 5A included in the Environmental Impact Report, applicants must have a locally adapted CAP or GHG reduction plan to be eligible to receive grant funding for planning and capital projects from SGIP. Agencies that do not have a locally adapted CAP or GHG reduction plan can apply for SGIP funding to develop one under the Climate Action Plan project type. The evaluation criteria for this project type prioritizes funding for new CAPs and over climate action plan activities. So previous SGIP cycles awarded points for matching funds. Points were awarded based on the amount of matching funds the applicant provided compared to the total cost of the project. Other Transnet funds, including local street and road program funding, were allowed to be used as match. In prior cycles, however, concerns were raised about allowing Transnet funding to be used as match, since the Transnet ordinance specifically refers to matching state and federal funds. Staff recommends that other Transnet funding, including local street and road program funding, not be permitted as matching fund source. Applicants would still be permitted to submit projects that have elements funded by Transnet, but the applicant would not receive points for these matching funds. Matching funds are not required, and the points comprise only 5% of the total points available, so this change is not anticipated to have a big impact on applications. The Independent Taxpayer Oversight Committee at their next meeting will be asked to consider staff recommendation that other Transnet local street and road program funding not be permitted as a matching fund source. This recommendation, along with the feedback from this committee, will be provided to the Board of Directors for consideration when they review the Cycle 6 call for projects in November. I'm going to pass it back to Goldie to talk about the call for projects.
Thanks, Stacy. Thanks for going over the development of the call. And now we'll go over the final call for projects. So similar to previous rounds of funding cycles for the Smart Growth Program, staff proposes two types of projects that would be eligible to receive funding. That's planning and capital. And then to address the mitigation measures in the 2021 Regional Plan EIR, a third project type is proposed for climate action plans. The majority of the funds will, however, be made available to the capital category, as you'll see in the next slide. So staff proposes to release $45 million for Cycle 6. The pie chart on the left shows the breakdown of the proposed amounts that would be available for each of the three categories. We have $30 million available for capital, $12 million for planning, and the remaining $3 million for climate action plan. Agencies can submit multiple applications for consideration under each category. And if there's leftover funding for a given category, say because it's undersubscribed, we would be able to move it around to an oversubscribed project category. The table on the right includes the minimum and maximum award amounts for each project category and their associated performance period as required under board policy. So we noted in red here, the raised amounts for maximum caps for planning and capital, which Stacey talked about earlier. Those were raised as a result of feedback we got from working groups and jurisdictional staff. So this slide presents to you the evaluation criteria for planning and capital projects. The criteria are largely the same, but for on the capital side, we have an additional sub-criteria 4A titled Major Milestones Completed. This provides points for projects that are progressing through their typical capital project milestones, such as planning, environmental, securing right-of-way permits, or if they're ready to construct. I also want to note that we added an additional sub-criteria called efficient use of program funds. This is new for Cycle 6, and it evaluates a project's scope, schedule, and budget, and will award points based on how well a grantee clearly demonstrates how they can effectively utilize SGIP funding. The grant applications that will be provided with the Call for Projects package will provide guidance to applicants to consider when they're developing their project scope, schedule, budgets, and will encourage applicants to address types of challenges that we've seen in the past to attempt to reduce the number of amendments and withdrawals that are requested by grantees. Lastly, we have this table showing the evaluation criteria for climate action plan projects. As a reminder, SANDAG requires local jurisdictions to have adopted climate action plans in order to receive smart growth funding. This category of funding is available for 3 types of projects. They're on the left side in the blue in the bullets. Applicants seeking to develop a new climate action plan or to update a climate action plan will be updated or will be evaluated under sub-criteria 1. And then for agencies who already have an updated cap but are seeking funding for implementation or monitoring will be evaluated under evaluation criteria 2. Those projects can also receive, any new caps or cap updates can also receive points for category number 2. Any planning or capital projects coming out of the cap would apply for funding in the planning or capital project types respectively. So on this slide is the upcoming Smart Growth Incentive Program Cycle 6 timeline. So we'll be making our rounds to PACS, the ITALC, and the board in October, November of this year. So we're here in October at DC. We plan to go to the Regional Planning Committee on the 1st of November, followed by ITALC on the 13th of November. And if all goes well, we will be scheduled to go to the board on November 22nd. And upon board approval, we'll release the call for projects around the last 2 weeks of November, which will initiate the grant application period, which will be 90 days, and we'll close out around February of 2025. After the project closes, the project grant application period closes, we'll commence evaluation and development of funding recommendations in the spring of next year. And then once we have a funding recommendation, we'll take that to the ITALCs, PACs, and boards between May and July of 2025. And around this time next year, we can anticipate grant agreements and notices to proceed in October 2025. And that concludes my presentation. I'll turn it back over to Chair Hsu for any discussion, questions.
Thank you, Gauri. Let's go on to public comment, Tessa, and we'll do that and then go to member comments and questions.
Thank you, Chair. I have 2 public comments on this item. Robert Gurman, please come to the podium.
I'm not even going to try with this thing. So I have some handouts, but the reason I came to speak underneath this is it's smart transportation for the expansion at the airport at San Diego International Airport. Now, people say, well, why am I here? I'm here because you guys are all elected officials. You seem responsive to the community. And when I started asking questions about my little local airport called Gillespie Field, I was told if I wasn't happy with what was happening at Gillespie Field, I'm not a pilot. If I wasn't happy with what was happening at Gillespie Field, I could move. I've been where I'm at, my family, since 1976 out in Lakeside. So the second comment, obviously, was, well, what is happening at Gillespie? Okay, I'll follow through. What is happening at Gillespie? That's none of your business. You're not a pilot. With that and an offer from the director of airports, if I would take 2 tickets to the air show to leave this thing alone, because it's bigger than I am, I figured I had a new hobby. And so that's why I'm here. Today, the handout I have now is titled Near Miss on Runway at San Diego International Airport. Several channels put out stories on this. The best was CBS 8 because it quoted a flight instructor who said there's a catastrophe brewing at San Diego International Airport. It's well known. It's been whispered for years. The next one is FAA to audit runway incursions at America's busiest airport. That includes San Diego International Airport. And the last one I have is San Diego Airport ranks among the lowest rated for customer satisfaction by J.D. Powers. It is 21st out of 27 large airports. Somebody's got to make these guys accountable. Somebody has to have some oversight. I mean, you go to the meetings and it's like the citizens are non-existent.
Sir, your time has expired.
Here's my hand. Here's my handout.
Our final comments on this item, Blair Beekman, please go ahead.
Hi, thank you, Blair Beekman. Good luck to ourselves in finding out and relearning exactly what is the organization of all of the airports in the area, and what is their community meeting process, what is their organizational process. To understand that where they're at currently can help the questions of the public comment at this time. And thanks for his public comment a lot, and what we can do in the future of just being clear with each other, all the different airports and such. For myself, in this item, I wanted to thank you, thank you for it. In the big, these are big ideals, you're talking about and funding things with this project. And I am the little person who is supposed to be reminding you with these important complete streets projects and other projects that we really have to be thinking about a future of tech accountability in the placement of the future of these projects. I mean, it's well and good that we're trying to build a more sustainable future and a multimodal transportation future. Those are important things. And we have to learn a more holistic approach with our complete streets practices that include how to be open and accountable with the tech, with the public. If you guys do all this good work and then create the tech where you don't want to talk about it and make it a confusing process, that's not good practices. And that's not our sustainable, peaceful future. I mean, these are really concepts towards peace and open democracy, everyone. And you guys continuously keep this stuff secret as if it's a national security threat when it's not. And I'm tired of it, Learn to trust that you can talk about it. The public won't be tearing down the castle walls. And let's develop dialogue. We have to. It's for peace.
Your time expired, and that concludes the public comments.
Thank you, Tessa. Well, again, thank you, Godi and Stacy, for working on this project and incorporating many of the comments that we've given you to redo these to the criteria for these grant programs. Any member comments or questions? Supervisor Montgomery Staff.
Thank you, Chair. I just have a couple of quick comments. I also want to thank Stacy and Goldie and also Jenny Russo for engaging with my staff on the county interactions with the Smart Growth Incentive Program. And from those conversations, we did find that Casa de Oro was funded for their specific plan, and that bled out into areas of Spring Valley. So we just want to keep that line of communication open. The funding was used for the community-based transportation program, which has plans for improving connections to mobility hubs in those unincorporated areas. So that's super important for us. We also learned in that engagement that more weight is given to applications that are community-led. So my question is, what type of outreach is being done to make sure that the community-based organizations that seek to apply for this funding are aware of the co-applicant process and what it takes to be a co-applicant?
So we did present the criteria and get feedback from our social equity working group. So that group of community-based organizations is aware. In terms of other community-based organizations, there hasn't been any greater engagement with the community, but we sort of rely on the local jurisdictions to work with the community-based organizations in the areas that they're applying for.
Okay, we'll talk about that more, about the ways to make that happen, because I think there's even more opportunity there. I see that we need a motion, so I'll move staff recommendation. Thank you.
Any other hands raised? Yes, Councilman Musgrove.
Stacey, you mentioned something about matching funds and that would no longer be a criteria. Can you give a little more detail on that?
So matching funds are still a criteria. It's worth 5%. What we're saying is that the local street and road, the Transnet local street and roads funding, we are considering not allowing that as matching funds because the ordinance reads state and federal funding. So there's been some confusion in the past. You can still use local, state, and local street and road funding towards the project. It just won't give you points towards the match.
Okay, so you could use your local funding out of your general funds for your community, but then you would have to come up with additional funding for the matching.
So we don't require matching. We're just saying that you can get 5% of your points, like 5% of the points are weighted based on matching funds. You don't need those. You can use matching funds if you would like, but we're just saying that moving forward, the local, state, and road funding is not going to be allowed to be used, well, based on ITALK's recommendation, is not going to be able to be used because of the way that the ordinance is written, that it should be federal and state funding as match. Does that make sense?
Well, it does, but I can see where it's going to harm some communities that rely on that to meet their matching fund criteria. So again, I think there's going to be a little bit of an imbalance and it kind of flies in the face of equity. Thank you.
We don't anticipate it to, because it's such a small percentage, we don't anticipate it to really have an impact on where the grants lie in the final
Well, I get
evaluation.
that it's only 5%, but sometimes that is the deciding factor when it comes to making the decisions on where the funds go. And if that is a graded part of the rubric, then I think it will have impact.
Stacey, with clarification, this is in trying to comply with the ordinance itself, which precludes local funding as a match.
That's correct.
Yeah, so I think we didn't, so Councilman Musgrove, I don't know if we had a lot of choice in that issue, and that the ordinance specifies state and federal funding as a match as opposed to a local funding.
Okay, so then maybe that should not be part of the grading process at all. Maybe it should be taken out because some communities will not be able to meet those funds and they will then be hamstrung by not receiving that additional 5%. If we're not going to level the playing field, then we need a new field.
Yeah.
If you have other local, so what we're saying is Transnet can't be used as a leverage because it's a Transnet program. But if you have developer fees, general fund, some other local, you can still use that. It still counts as a match. We're just trying to isolate the Transnet part so that we're not matching Transnet with Transnet. That's the intent that we're trying to get at here.
Is this, for the team to clarify, this is right now the staff recommendations. It's not you decide if you want to amend it, change it, or whatever. So I want to make that very clear.
I was looking for the clarification. I was watching the bullet points and listening to the presentation, and that became part of the presentation without that subset of information behind it. So I did want that clarification. Thank you.
Right. Well, Councilman Musgrove, I understand your comment, and I think it's a good point, but to me, it doesn't make sense for allowing the same source to be a matching source for the same grant program.
I don't disagree with that at all. My concern is that some communities will not be able to come up with those funds, so that those communities that can will then get a 5% bump and potentially receive more funding because they have more money to spend on it.
Right. No, that's
Whereas some communities that do not will not be able to meet that criteria and we left out, so that it does harm those who probably need it the most. So I would recommend, at least at this point, to evaluate the ordinance or the criteria and not include that 5% at all.
Yeah,
at least that anchor.
That's a point well taken. I think most organizations these funding sources are movable, so you kind of move one funding source from one to another so that you could meet the matching requirements for one source. So cities sometimes use that technique so that they can meet the matching requirements for a grant program. It's a shifting of funding for a project. In any case, that's a point well taken, Councilman Musgrove. Any other comments? If not, I have a question with regards to climate action plans. First, our climate action plans, if an applicant has a climate action plan, is that a criteria in the grading process?
That's a requirement to apply for the SGIP funds.
Great. So, there are climate action plans, and sometimes there's other climate action plans. So, do we have criteria as to what constitutes a climate action plan?
It is written for eligibility. It's dictated by what's in the EIR for the 2021 regional plan. It has qualifiers that have to be met for that cap to qualify. And so far, all of the jurisdictions that have a climate action plan that's been adopted meet those criteria for eligibility.
So, climate action plans are changing as we go forward. One, initially, the criteria that many community activists and people concerned with the climate would say, well, it should at least be legally binding and goes through CEQA qualified. So it has to be one that is at least gone through EIR process. Would that be some criteria that we have in place now?
It's not right now, but it could be something if you wanted to include it.
And I think that's important because climate action plans are a relatively new kind of document. We didn't have it certainly 15 years ago. And we're learning more and more that climate action plans should have some minimal criteria. One is that it's legally binding. Second, that it goes through the CEQA process. And now what's even more important, that it abides by at least state law and science. We have a lot of climate action plans. I don't know if it abides or even because when it goes with the current science on climate action, what a climate action plan should have. So for example, right now, the criteria should be that not only go through CEQA and be legal and binding, but also meets at least state law that we have now, which would mean SB 32 and the scoping plans from CARB. That's the current science. And as the science changes, which probably will be in the next few years, that climate action plans need to be kept up with that. And with that, I would suggest that climate action plans be updated on a regular basis. Many cities go through 5-year cycles. I think we should be shorter on that. Science is moving much faster, and sometimes a 2-year update. So these are not another new CEQA process. They're usually amendments to the existing CEQA document that the city has for that climate action plan. So it's not a real difficult process to do. Well, I think that's very necessary. We have climate action plans in our jurisdiction, in our region, that I would say don't qualify as a climate action plan. If they don't meet climate science, if they don't meet the goals that science have said that we need to have, we can't call that a climate action plan, let alone the issue of implementation. That's another criteria which I don't want to get into, but I think the other question I have is we've had smart growth projects throughout our region for quite some time now, but I don't know if we have any real assessment of how well they have done. I know there's some criteria with regards to assessment tools, but I think I'll give you a more positive example of what I'm thinking of when I say assessment. Recently, this committee and the SANDAG board heard about the bike projects that we've been involved in, that SANDAG has funded. And these bike projects, after further study, show that not only did they increase bike use, bike mode share, it also increased walk mode share and reduce VMT and improve on safety issues. These are post-project assessments, which I think tells us hey, these projects works or they're working. In the smart growth projects, I don't know if we have a lot of data on that. And certainly, I don't know how we can work that into the criteria or assessment of the grant applicants, particularly if they have done projects in the past. It would be nice to have that. Now, if I was a grant writer for that city, I would include positive data to make that project more competitive. But in the list of criteria that we've been presented, I don't know if that was listed in terms of past performance to that degree. So I don't know if Cody or Stacy, you have any comments on how that's worked in, because I'm worried that a city received grant projects in the past. We've given them a fair amount of money and they completed those projects, but they don't have a lot to show in terms of any data, or in fact, we may have contradictory data that those projects did any real good and with the intent of the grant program.
So moving forward for cycle 6, we have, I think there's an attachment to this item. It's a performance measures table. We're requiring that each grantee commit to at a minimum 5 performance measures. It'll be contractually binding. We'll incorporate it into their agreement and it will be tracked quarterly. So they have to identify how they're performing activities that achieve their performance measures that they've indicated in their agreement. And then at the final project closeout, we review their performance measure, ensure that they're achieved and their target goals are achieved. And that allows us to more or less like close them out or pay them out. If they're not meeting their performance measures, either at the end or along the process, they would be tracked in our quarterly progress updates and be put on a watch list, and we'd bring them back to ITALC or PACS to bring them up as projects of concern. Letting you know if they're not meeting project milestones or if they're not meeting performance metrics. And if a project, say, did not meet their performance metric, we would bring them to you before the project close and determine how you would like to proceed and options that you could pursue if they're not meeting their performance objectives.
And Chair Shu, for your reference, it's on page 69 in the agenda packet.
Great. No, I love hearing that, and I know that's a new step that we're going forward, and I'm glad that we're smart moving forward with that. But I want to also, now that I just asked for that and asked for that data, and that cities are going to be forced to actually monitor things like mode share, I think it's great that cities do that. But I'm also cognizant of Councilman Musgrove's comment, which had to do with how about the smaller entities that don't have a lot of resources? Well, can we make not necessarily adjustments, but understand that small cities may not have the ability to do as much assessment as bigger cities with more resources. Nevertheless, I'm glad we're going that issue. So,
Chair?
Yes.
I think, Antoinette, do you want to?
I was just going to let Councilmember Musgrove know that he could change the motion to recommend that we approve with removing the staff recommendation.
Well, that would be it to forward on to the board as you reference. Yes, thank you.
And Chair Shu, I was going to add that the most recent Transnet performance audit that was completed earlier this year, they did do a deep dive specifically into smart growth. And there's a link to that in the packet. So they did try to look at past projects that were funded and kind of what do they look like today. Sometimes we don't have an ability to follow a project 10 years ago, 5 years ago. So they did do a deep dive into that to see if projects were performing. And the general synopsis was that they were, and these projects were, meeting the goals of smart growth, but there's definitely a data gap that's missing there that we're trying to get through this call with adding the performance measures.
No, I appreciate the attention to that. Any other comments, Councilman Zito?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I guess just along the subject of the matching grants, I mean, I'd be a little nervous of making a recommendation that we pull out that measurement simply because, as far as I can tell from my experience on the boards and the committee so far, pretty much all of our grant programs give some sort of credit towards having matching funds there. It's just something we do. And I would certainly like to hear, for example, ITALC's and other committees' opinion on whether or not we don't give any credit for a matching grant. I fully understand the comment made by Councilmember Musgrove, but I right now would be primarily interested in, since it's such a small percent, keeping that that 5% in there if possible. I did also want to address just some comments made by the chair. I fully support a lot of his comments saying that that climate action plan should have more rigorous requirements around them, making sure that they're actually is. We as the city of Solana Beach just approved our latest climate action plan, and something that we're getting this time that we did not get last time is a cost estimate and an actual plan of, an execution plan and a cost estimate of what this is going to cost like. And I think that will be a great thing to see. I do contend or have a little bit of a difference of opinion though, which is, at least from my experience, I have seen no benefit that I can measure at this point around actually having a legally binding plan. From what I can tell so far, making that a requirement, all that does is feed more money to the lawyers. It creates a lot more funds that go towards creation of that plan and consultants, and a lot more funds that get battled in lawsuits. And I'd rather spend that money on actually reducing my city's carbon footprint. So far, that's why our city hasn't done that. We, at least Solana Beach, is aggressively meeting its goals so far. Our current plan that we just adopted by 2035 is, if we execute on it, is predicted to hit a 70% reduction in greenhouse gas, where the state law only requires 50%. So those are the kinds of things I would like to see, as opposed to things that are just going to potentially encourage more lawsuits and litigation, which has been the end result of a lot of the legally binding plans so far. So that's just my comment on that item. Thanks.
Can I ask a point of clarification, Chair?
Go ahead.
So the matching funds, not to beat this dead horse already, was that a standalone item, or was it part and parcel of a multiple for that 5%? Because if it's simply one of the criteria to meet the 5%, then I would say we're asking jurisdictions to provide extra funding to receive back the tax dollars that they already gave in, which is how Transnet's funded. And so now you're saying you need to give us more money to get your money back. So I would just say, if it's not a standalone item, that doesn't necessarily need to affect that 5%. You can still have the 5 if there are other measurements to be graded. And
It's a standalone.
yeah, so I have a real problem with that, because now we're asking them, we're effectively holding their tax dollars hostage to give us more money, or at least prove that you have it so you can get your money back. And that's really what we're talking about when we're talking about Transnet funds.
I actually have a point of clarification procedurally. What is the motion on the floor? I know I put forward a motion and it was not seconded.
We don't have a motion on the floor at the moment. But I think one was being put.
I did make one, but it did not get a second. Is it not I just want to know where we're at procedurally right now.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
I think it wasn't loud enough, perhaps. But yes.
No, it was on the mic. It was loud enough. It was post my comments.
I'd be happy to second your motion if it's still active.
So, okay, so we have a motion to approve staff recommendation from Councilmember Montgomery Stepp, and second by Zito. Do you have a comment from Sam?
Then I'd make a substitute motion, Chair, that we do take that portion out, making it a condition of the 5% to the matching funds. I just think it's a little disingenuous to some of our communities that don't have that discretionary funding.
Okay, we have a substitute motion from Councilmember Musgrove. Do we have a second? Going once, twice. The substitute motion dies without a second. Any other last comments before I ask for a vote on the motion? Hearing none. We're at the original motion by Supervisor Montgomery Stepp, and seconded by Zito.
I'll be calling a roll call vote, and I'd just like to remind the members, you will also need to use your clicker to register your vote. Airport Authority is absent. City of San Diego, Councilmember Campillo.
Yes.
County of San Diego, Supervisor Montgomery Stepp.
Yes.
East County Chair Shu.
Yes.
MTS, Councilmember Moreno.
Moreno, yes.
North County Coastal, Councilmember Zito.
Zito, yes.
North County Inland, Councilmember Musgrove.
Aye.
North NCTD, Deputy Mayor Edson.
Yes.
Port of San Diego and South County are absent. And that motion passes unanimously with those members present.
Thank you. We'll move on to item number 6. Brian will provide us an update on the transit fare discount study and transit equity pilot update. Brian Lane.
Good morning. Thank you. I think you all know me, Brian Lane, Senior Transit Planner. I'm going to provide an update on our transit fare discount study that we did over the last year, as well provide an update on our transit equity pilot that brought forth the YOP, the Youth Opportunity Pass. The transit fare discount study came out of the last regional plan. It was an implementation action item for us to really dive into the weeds of what kind of fare discounts we should include in the next regional plan. So it was really meant to inform the 2025 regional plan. The purposes of our study were also to really research best practices I'll talk about in a little bit. Definitely learn the community's preferences for various types of programs, and then actually dive into some types of programs that could be feasible and get some of the outcomes from that. We started this a little over a year ago last summer. Got some input from the social equity working groups outreach team, and then formed like a subcommittee of CBO groups, hired a consultant who was able to work with the CBO groups and really started talking to them about what kind of goals they'd like to see from the study and what kind of outreach that we should do to really ensure that we're getting public participation and getting as much feedback as we can to inform this report. We did a lot of outreach in the November, December timeframe last winter, and then this spring and summer finalized the report, and finally are here in front of you today to talk about it. So the CBO outreach team and our partners worked on the program goals and came up with these 6, making sure that transportation is more equitable, getting more people riding, to reduce VMT, improve climate sustainability, minimize transit cost impacts. And this is a big part of this project. MTS and NTD staff were both a part of this project working team and wanted to make sure that, we don't just throw free fares for all out there without considering the impacts that does have on transit in terms of cost and ridership and safety and security, all those types of considerations. We wanted to maintain a good customer experience. That's something we've been hearing a lot from the public, and including maintaining transit operations, performance, and maintenance. So we did a best practices dive into a bunch of cities. We did key in on 7, and in the final report, there's a whole chapter on this best practices research if you want to go jump in there. We did find a couple agencies, Kansas City and Albuquerque, who post-COVID did start a free fare for all program, but those cities are much, much smaller. Their transit systems are much, much smaller. Taking that kind of a impact with the free fare for all was easier for them, and they've kept it going, but I think I've heard Kansas City's rethinking continuing that permanently because there are cost considerations that are starting to really impact their transit operations. Seattle and Los Angeles and Denver and San Francisco have all started YOP or Youth Pass type programs, either being free or subsidized through school districts. And we're great to hear San Francisco has a great low income program that we were able to talk to their folks about and get some understanding. And then Philadelphia is kind of our sister system on the East Coast, and they have similar youth and low income type programs. Public engagement, again, was a big part of this whole program. We did surveys, both online and paper, when we were out at our stakeholder events. We did the in-person pop-up activities around the community. I think we had over 600-700 touch points on that with our CBO partners, attending the existing community events, hosting tables, co-hosting events with our CBO partners, did the stakeholder engagement with our mobility and social equity working groups to get feedback, and got a lot of great feedback. I believe we got over 2,000 surveys from our participants, which exceeded our goal of just 1,000 for that. While we were out there in the public, we had these boards up. We had 2 type of activities that we did ask the folks who came up to us to participate in. And one of them was to choose their top 3 discount programs from a list of multiple ones. And the results from that were they kind of favored low income transit discount programs, continuing programs for seniors. We already do have our senior disabled Medicare pass discount out there, and keeping the YOP pass. We also did, though, want to ask them where would they like to invest their transit funds, and that was a fun activity. They were given $100 play dollars and asked to spread that money out between, fare discount programs, making service faster and more frequent, adding it towards safety, doing things like adding lighting and bus shelters and things like that. And the results from that was, most people put their money. It was kind of a split across a lot of these. There was no clear winner, but people were saying they the frequent and more faster service is something they definitely want. Safety is also a big concern. And when we go out to public who don't ride transit, those are the similar reasons why they say they don't ride transit is the services aren't fast enough and frequent enough. And, safety is always a big concern. Fare discounts for them, though, was the third priority in that list after those two things. Survey results were kind of similar. It was an online or the paper survey doing similar activities. They had similar results from those surveys. And again, it was prioritizing, prioritizing transit fare discount programs, low income was number one to them, keeping the youth opportunity pass. And then for the survey results, also considering something for all students. When we asked them where they wanted to also invest their transit funds, it was similar. Safety was not as high there, but frequent, fast service hours, nights and mornings and weekends, increasing the service hours on those. And then fare discounts was third on that. So we analyzed, we took all those results, and our consultant and the CBO working group chose 9 programs to analyze. I'll talk just quickly about some of them, but the first one was continuing the YOP pass, as well as the other existing discounts that we do have today, that senior disabled pass that we do have. So that was the baseline for all the programs that we analyzed. I just wanted to show on this slide the chart of our YOP ridership. April 2022 is when it started, the gray column on the far left. We were around 300,000 riders a month. And that's quickly doubled and sometimes tripled and 4 times as much ridership over the last couple of years. So it's been super popular. It's been heavily used. The youth love it. CBOs love it. Schools are liking it. It's been very popular. So that was, again, that program was our baseline. And then these next 8 were the programs that we analyzed, just if, trying to see all the results that would come from these, from our modeling, from our consultant, to look at what kind of ridership gains you might have, what the transit costs are for these. What does that mean if we do free fare for everybody? You can remove all the fare boxes, so you can remove that small cost from your program. But what is the total? If you do make it free for all, you're going to have to increase transit service out there because you're going to have that many more riders. And so, our report dives very deeply into all 8 of these as well. And if you want to jump into them, you can. It's a great report. But we did look at expanding the youth opportunity pass to 24 and under. That was one of the initial considerations from our social equity partners when they were asking for the YOP, was to do it to 24 and under. And as we were working through the social equity pilot, we had a limited budget, and we found out from the transit agencies that 18 and under is about $6 million a year, possibly to operate, because that's the lost revenue you might have from that. Expanding it to 24 and under jumps that number up to $30-40 million a year, because we have so many riders in that 18 to 24 age category. And pre-YOP, once you turned 18 or once you turned 19, you started paying full fare unless you had some sort of college discount. And so that was it's a heavy source of ridership income from both agencies. So it's very expensive. And as we were talking to the CBO partners about expanding it to 24, they started realizing that money probably be better spent focusing on transit improvements rather than making that free for that group. So we did the 18 and under. And again, like I said, it's been very popular. The other programs we dove into were just doing maybe a half fare for the 19 to 24. The low income program, which was again one of the favorites from our participants. We did look at some reduced programs for special user types, more including veterans, other types of students. Zero fare program for special user types. And then looking at fare discounts for higher education students, we were getting feedback that that's something that's interesting to them. The University of San Diego, UCSD has their UPass, where they charge, the students passed this on a vote about 10 years ago, where they charge themselves a fee every quarter, and they get a transit pass that gives them unlimited rides on the system. They're the first university and the only one so far to do that in the region. The other universities up north, NCD's got partnerships with Palomar and San Marcos to provide discounts, but those students at those universities haven't dove into that type of UPass thing. SDSU has been talking with MTS a little bit about doing that. and that would be great. But if more universities can jump into that type of program, that does reduce the price for them heavily because it's a guaranteed income for the transit agencies. And we did look at that and see what kind of results you'd get if you had more universities getting that free fares. And then number 8 and 9 were kind of the swinging the spectrum to the full free fare on number 9, or just a discount on those. And again, those are very expensive and do create ridership increases, but do create a lot of safety security issues in terms of you now have much more crowded vehicles, and so you'll have to expand service and the like. Again, so our key takeaways between the public and CBOs and our transit agency partners was really that frequency, service improvements, making it faster, more longer service hours were the priority for the public. Keeping the Youth Opportunity Pass, I think, is our priority, obviously. And then if you do have more funding, consider a low-income fare as something that you would dive into. And so in the report, I think we just used the 100% federal poverty level as our threshold for that. That makes you include probably about 2/3 of our riders today are actually below the 100% threshold. As we're looking at the best practices across the nation, some of them are doing 200, 300% type federal poverty level thresholds to really try and draw in the most impoverished riders out there to provide them with that relief so they can ride and have their funds for something else. This was just a chart of that activity I told you about. If you had $100, you could spend it. And this kind of just shows that nothing really stood out. Safety and keeping transit more frequent were the top ones, but everything else was kind of given equal priorities as well with their funding. So again, with the transit equity pilot, because this all kind of ties together, just wanted to make sure we're talking about the next steps for that. We started this back in 2020, late 2021. And the Youth Opportunity Pass was what came out of that. We had hoped to start transit improvements on nights and weekends, but at that time, both agencies were going through the driver shortages, and so that wasn't something we could focus our money on. But that was, again, a priority of that group. But the YOP did come out of that. We did have some other proposals during that time to look at an analysis for the Blue Line service, express service. And so we have started and we'll be starting soon getting a consultant on board to really do a dive into that express service. As well as Mario was mentioning earlier, the rapids as proxies for things like this. We will be starting a planning study on a rapid route that comes from the San Isidro to downtown. So we are starting the analyses on that. The last one was a brainchild of the group as well, because the trolley doesn't run late at night because of the freight service between the border and downtown. We were thinking maybe you could do voucher programs, but in the interim, MTS is about to start, I think, January, a new express route that goes overnight in the late hours to provide that interim trolley service. And then we do have a rapid route planning study that will start as well in that same corridor for during the day hours as a proxy for a Blue Line Express. Those service enhancements that we did talk about back in 2022 with the group, we were looking at earlier first departure and later final departures, weekends and nights. The group did prioritize the routes for these enhancements in underserved and underrepresented communities and provided us a list of routes that we would look at that time. I believe both MTS and NCD, in the meantime, as you know, they've been looking at increased funding potentially with SB 125 and other things. We're looking at increasing services in these areas as well, and they're both planning increases when they can get the funding fully dedicated. But our next steps is, we have informed the 2025 regional plan that low-income fares is probably your best move forward. Our transit leap already includes all the types of things that the public want: much more frequent service, much faster service, more rapids, more trains, all that. But we have informed that. And then over the winter here, we'll keep working with the transit operators on these short-term service enhancements in the underserved areas. They want to do it. Funding, again, is always the big thing. So how to actually implement this, we'll continue to work with them on securing the funding for both for YOP. That does run out in 2026. And so trying to find a permanent source for that, working with them, and then as well as new transit investments and other discount programs that we can do. So with that, feel free to visit our website. I think the report is linked in the staff report if you want to dive into that. The first few pages of the report are great in the introduction part, offering a glimpse of what the whole FAIR study did kind of conclude. So with that, Chair, I conclude my presentation.
Thank you, Brian. As we go into this discussion, and I'm going to take public comments in a second as well, but I just want some clarification. This is a discussion item, and Antoinette or Maria, you can also maybe give us some idea of our discussion. How does that reflect the next regional plan and this discussion, this study, just so I can put everything in scope of what we're doing?
So in the 2025 regional plan, we extend the YOP program and other additional subsidies for transit, but that's all contingent upon a funding source, a stable funding source for that in the future. So that's really kind of the discussion that we want to start having with the Transportation Committee and the board is where will that funding come from to sustain that program and implement some of these other recommendations that came out of the study.
So just for clarification, this discussion you take into context as you work on the next regional plan. So it really has a lot of importance. We're not just talking about this simply because
it's not just the YOP that we included, obviously, in the regional plan, but we also increased the frequencies to 10 minutes for all of the services. We added additional rapid, and we extended hours of service to address all of that feedback that we got from the region on what's important to them when it comes to transit improvements.
Great. And I think that's so important in the planning process. That's why we did this study and why we went to the extent of getting a lot of public input from a lot of stakeholders and groups to give us more information as we go forward. I'm glad to put that in context. Let's go ahead and take public comment now. Tessa, do we have any public comments on this item?
Thank you, Chair. There are no public comments on item 6.
Any comments from board members? Seeing hands, let's go with Councilman Vivian Moreno.
I've pressed my, is this not working?
We're not using it. So your hands and your hands and my hearing, so you have to probably do both.
Thank you, Mr. Lane, for the presentation and for the work on this study. Back in 2022, I was the chair of SANDAG's Social Equity Working Group, where we included the Youth Opportunity Pass program in our Equity Early Action Plan. So it definitely it warms my heart just seeing it move forward. The SANDAG's Transit Fare Discount Study noted that the Youth Opportunity Pass pilot program has proven to be very successful, and maintaining it is a high priority by the public. And I couldn't agree more. The Youth Opportunity Pass program has been a game changer in making transit accessible for our young people and ensuring that they have opportunities to access school, internship, jobs, and also other opportunities throughout the region. Maintaining access to fare-free transit for our youth will help foster lifelong transit riders and strengthen the future of our transportation system. Oftentimes at MTS, I have been a stickler about our customers, essentially our ridership, and making sure that we continue to bring in more riders. And I can't think of a better way to do that than to have folks that already know the system, already know what time it comes in, and it's just a matter of getting them to pay it once they transition. So I do understand SANDAG will continue funding the Youth Opportunity Pass in its current structure through June 2026. But going forward, we must focus on identifying sustainable long-term funding to ensure that the Youth Opportunity Pass remains a permanent part of our transit systems. But again, thank you to staff members. Thank you to, I know, Brian, it's not just you, it's a whole team. And so I want to thank them for all the work that we did, back in the day in Zoom, right? Those wonderful Zoom meetings that we had for so long, and just continue to tell folks, members of our community, that your feedback is very important in improving the transit system. Also, I do want to recognize Mid-City CAN, Casa Familiar, Iliad and EHC for their many, I mean, a decade, I think, many years of work in making the Youth Opportunity Pass a reality. So just all in all, this is great to see, and thank you for the presentation. And that concludes my comments, Chair.
Thank you. Supervisor Commissioner.
Thank you very much, Chair. I will start by thanking you, Brian, and the entire team for all of your work on this. Certainly in support of the youth opportunity passes, and can see kind of in real time the positive impact that it has had. So thank you for including that and being an active participant in all of those conversations around social equity. I've also just been a staunch advocate for Transportation Development Act reform. And so seeing how this presentation kind of relates to some of that work being done at the state level is extremely important for us to get to the many different goals that we have, the goals to serve our lower income communities, the climate action goals. It's just important that we look at that foundational act to continue to reach our goals. I did actually, my recent trip to Washington, D.C., actually hear about Kansas City and what they were doing. It's really cool. It was cool when I heard it, and I would like to kind of keep up on that to see, you know, what pitfalls they're sort of facing as they made a really major move. Would love to see the positive and keep up with the positives and negatives of that. I do have one question regarding the implementation of bus route service improvements in environmental justice communities. And this relates to MTS and our conversations around the improvements we'll be making with SB 125. And so just want to know like what that interaction was. I see focusing on the 961 in particular, but other communication around those two kind of different conversations that kind of come under this umbrella of social equity.
Yeah, and I'll let Mike maybe jump in a second, but those list of routes were following our initial social equity pilot work back in 2022, and those are the routes we identified. This was before we heard of, I think, SB 125 coming down and maybe saving transit a little bit, but and I know MTS has been doing their social equity listening tour and have developed routes that they would like to do improvements on.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And 125 was, the proposals for 125 are very span-based, not so much frequency. Some of the night owl service, late night service, early starts, late finishes, some weekends. But the specifics for each ones I don't have right now, but I'll definitely get those to you. But that's a great question.
Okay, thank you so much for that. I know with the SB 125, we've been, you know, kind of hoping and wishing and praying until recently, right? And so I know that's a sort of a newer conversation.
Yeah, there may be some overlaps of that.
Okay, thank you for keeping me updated on that. Just as a matter of feedback and requests, I just want to see the more being addressed around the first and last mile gaps between mobility hubs and residential centers. I think that that's important to be included in this conversation. And again, as we did an MTS for our legislative platform, we are kind of the aspirational goal, right, is to be able to provide free transit for folks. So just recommendations, implementation of the recommended policies from the health element of the SANDAG regional plan for 2025 and how they integrate here would be awesome. Thank you very much for the work.
Let's go to Councilman Edson and then Tizito.
Thank you, Chair. I also would like to echo thanks to staff, Brian and all for this report and this deep dive. I fully support and have been a longtime advocate for YOP, but free fare for all conceptually is great, but fare reduction, free fare must always come with sustainable sources of funding. It's otherwise just not sustainable for the agencies. I like the idea of adding multi-mobility to this because at NCTD right now, we're having great NCTD plus pilot programs, and they're really terrific. I mean, we're getting great ridership increases, and it really has been wonderful to work with the communities. Right now, we have a pilot program. We picked up the Sorrento Valley connector, but we also have a pilot program right now in operation in San Marcos. And it started out with higher fare. We adjusted that, lowered the fares down to be competitive with regular bus, and also worked with the city of San Marcos to realign what, the circulator part of it would be hitting. And it's just been a terrific program. So I think it's a poster child, and continuing to do that within other communities, I think is about the best thing that we can do right now.
Councilmember Zito.
Yeah, thanks. And again, thanks, Brian, for the information. I guess just a comments, particularly also hearing the comments from the other committee members too, that from my perspective, it would be interesting to see a greater intersection between what people are saying and what people are doing in these presentations, right? So there's a lot of survey results in here. I liked the inclusion of the data from the other agencies with respect to fares, but actually, it'd be great to have data from other agencies with respect to, and how that meshes with what people are saying, agencies, and with respect to what is the most cost-effective way to actually increase ridership. And particularly, earlier this year, I had read a report that came out of Europe somewhere. It may have been for the Channel, or that's a different beast, of course, to some degree, but where they had spent a ton of money, billions of dollars to reduce transit times and to increase frequencies for a very marginal bump in ridership. But as soon as they spent a little bit of money and provided free Wi-Fi, there was a big boost in ridership. And so, actually having this type of data and understanding what moves the needle relative, because people don't always, sadly enough, people don't always know what they want when they're speaking their words. And so we need to back that up with what we're seeing, as Ms. Edson just said, or Chair Edson from NCT, about what they're seeing in real data world applications. The other thing, when we do survey type input, I'd be curious if questions could be asked from the perspective of minimal acceptable, criteria, right? I mean, on a couple of the results, I guess one of them, safety was number 2, but on the other one, safety wasn't even in the top 3. Well, I think we would probably lose a good portion of our ridership if they didn't feel safe, right? So it's clearly just a threshold. You have to have a certain amount of safety. And while service hours certainly clearly are not the top priority necessarily, but I use, for example, the coaster to take the airport transit oftentimes, but many times I come back late and there's no train back. So I'm not going to be taking transit because there's simply no train. And so that's another impact. But otherwise, very good information, and thanks for the presentation.
Councilmember Musgrove.
Thank you, Chair. Excellent presentation. Just as a base of reference, I was the first manager, then the deputy director of transit security at MTS for several years. And to complement what the supervisor said, the positions on fare and fare reductions, it does kind of go on a cyclic basis. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. When we initiated the program with San Diego City College, and very simply a holographic sticker on their student ID card, we get them to ride the transit at an extremely reduced rate. They used it. They would come into the college station, they would go right across the street to the school, no matter where they were coming from within the city of San Diego or really the county. But I want to talk a little bit about something I think would be near and dear to the chair's heart, and that is the VMT, and a way to increase funding. When I worked at MTS, I live in San Marcos, I would drive the 7 miles to the Escondido Transit Center and then take the 280 Express. And it made one stop at Del Lago, and then it was at 10th and B. Then it turned down B Street and it stopped. And the people that would ride that bus with me every morning and then in the afternoon on the way home, they were working for some of our employers in the city that have a lot of professional employees that could afford to pay that. And it was double the rate, but $5 each way was nothing compared to what you would spend in gas and aggravation. and you're on the freeway for 35 minutes and you're not driving. And it was very relaxing both ways. But I would also ride with people that lived not in Temecula or Murrieta, but points north of there in Riverside County. And RTA set up a schedule to bring down a bus just before the 280 got to the Escondido Center. So those people would transfer over. And a lot of them worked for the city of San Diego, which had a great plan in place for extremely reduced fares so that they could ride that bus. But it was a lot of coordinated effort and it worked out really well. And that bus would get downtown with 25, 30, 35 people. And if you didn't get on early on Broadway on the return trip, it would be packed. So that's just the background on what can work with an increased fare, but with the demand was there because it went where you were going when you needed to be there. In the early hours, it was a 15-minute return rate, and then it went to every half hour, but you could guesstimate where you wanted to be using the schedule. Has there been any discussion about extending that out to points in the East County or the South County for those that come to work downtown? Instead of relying on a green line or an orange line, you now have an express bus that will get you from a central point, and it can be a transit center, it can be just about anywhere, to the downtown region.
In the regional plan, there's a bunch of rapid routes. Some of them they're all called rapid. Some of them are more express type freeway ones. And that's what Mario was kind of talking about earlier. There's a bunch, 805, 5, 56, 78 have routes that would probably on the freeways for 90% of their trips, trying to do a similar thing. And downtown's not the only population center. Kearney Mesa and Serrano Mesa, Serrano Valley, UTC, there's routes all hitting those areas. So in the plan, that's what we're hoping for. It's, to get those out. And
yeah. So when I would ride the 280 down, 35 minutes, which seems, how could that possibly be? But you're riding in the express lane the majority of the way.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then on the way home, on occasion, I would take the 235, which also went to the Escondido Transit Center, but it went everywhere else. So instead of 35 minutes to get home, it was an hour and 10, hour and 15 minutes. And it made a lot of stops. But the people that I would see riding south, they were not riding north on the 235. They were catching the 280. And I used to think, well, why are we not offering this service in other areas of the county to get to our major hiring centers, employment centers?
Yeah, and we do. And for like the 280, 290 in the regional plan, again, we identify making that all day, both directions. That's more expensive to operate. Right now, MTS just operates it south in the mornings, north in the afternoons. So if you can operate that express service all day with enough frequency, you may entice the riders who, if they workers who want to go home in the middle of the day, they don't want to take that 235, which is a little slower to go the whole way to Escondido because it goes through Claremont Mesa Boulevard and stops all along there. But the idea is once you start offering those more frequent services, you probably entice more folks.
A lot of great programs. I really enjoyed working at MTS and the hard work and the coordinated effort between NCTD, MTS, and SANDAG to get people where they're going. And thank you very much for the presentation.
Well, one thing that I think we will be coming back because it's a great discussion, but we really want to generate the discussion of the TC on the funding strategies. And how we're going to move forward. And maybe in the near future, we can have another similar presentation or kind of workshop between TC. So we develop ideas of funding because that is, at the end of the day, follow the funding and we need to figure it out. They're very successful programs. They're great ideas. We are proposing also from East County rapid routes, but it's all going to come in. How do we make it happen for our operators and for the infrastructure? So we do need to have those discussions where TC can give us some guidance of where we should be starting to look into.
Just
Roy, go ahead.
Yeah, just two quick comments. So Brian, I just didn't notice you guys have a TDM strategy or commute strategy. It just wasn't really mentioned there because you do work with employers to support transit or provide employers with reduced rates for their employees. So was that a factor in your report? Or increasing that program to get more revenue into the transit system, but at a discounted rate?
Right. Yeah. to be honest, the TDM was not in this. It is a huge part of what we do currently. Our TDM program is reaching out to employers. They have the Try Transit for a month. You get it for free. City of San Diego actually was great. They hopped on and made for all their employees now get a free transit pass. But the regional plan does include a lot more TDM policies and funding to encourage employers to do things with us.
Yeah, I just didn't see it in the report, so I
No.
want to highlight that there are other activities that are being done. And then I just had one quick question to your comment. So for the routes that are along the 15, aren't those partially funded through the tolls that are collected on the 15? So as Mario mentioned, supplementing transit through the tolls that are received through the managed lane system provides a dual benefit. So as we discussed that in the plan, that should be something that's, supplementing those buses and other transit that's being developed. Thank you.
Any other comments before I have go through my list of issues? And I'm glad both Mario and Roy, you brought up issue of funding. We just heard MTS changing a major policy because they're worried about the $1 million a month loss of revenue from fare aversion. The beginning of this topic, or the title of this item, included the word equity. So I think with Roy's comment, I think that's very important to note, as well as other goals that we have in our region. And one of them being a reduction of VMT and congestion if we develop different mechanisms to shift mode share, increase mode share on transit. So our previous goals for our region was to increase transit mode share towards 10%. And we're currently 4%, depending who's asking or who's giving the answer. But in any case, we have to double, if not triple, our mode share of transit use. At the same time, we want to keep, of course, our transit agencies solvent, operating. In fact, they need more resources, more development, more facilities and improvements. So we do have to have a funding stream that works. And I hope in our regional plan that we think, that just as you just mentioned, Roy, let's deal with the question of equity. And that's why I want us to define equity in those terms, shifting resources to help those who have less resources, or at least are helping in terms of reducing health impacts. So I think that's a really important thing. So Brian, you have a lot more work to do, because I've given you the whole question of how do we deal with this going forward to reach 10% mode share on transit. And that includes not only rapid programs, but a funding mechanism to help us move in that direction, which then includes how we deal with managed lanes and how we fund projects. So the 15 corridor, I think, is a good example of that, how we can enhance the rapid program with some funding from the managed lane program, which if we're doing that now and it's working, certainly we should be expanding that big time throughout our region. So I hope that's in the thinking. I have some questions. Sorry that Chair Pinto has left. I was going to bring up, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see you. I want to bring up equity for another, in another context, which is how do we serve a variety of communities that are underserved? And we know in our rural areas, there's an issue, and I'm more cognizant of other places throughout the world and the United States in which microtransit is used as a way to address that. So I hope that we can look towards maybe some pilot programs in that regard to fit the needs of some of our rural communities. How that is designed, I don't know, Nate or Brian, did you guys look into that in this particular study in terms of use or surveys?
For rural specifically, not as much in the fare discount program study. In the regional plan, we've got tons of programs that, increase service out in the rural routes today only operate one day a week or something like that. We ask for them to go daily, multiple times a day. Microtransit service, the flexible fleet kind of a pilots, microtransit in a like 4 or 5 of the rural communities. So definitely in the regional plan.
Right. So I think that's great that we can think towards that. I hope maybe that's something we should be piloting. We've got some successful pilot programs in the last few years that are being implemented for various kinds of micro transit programs. Can we look at some potential micro transit pilots to serve rural communities? And then the other thought I have, which Brian, I know you've heard me say this before, is how about some micro transit programs to address the last and first 15 minutes of a person's trip at other times of the day other than the busy times. So we have some pilot programs now that serve people can go to the beach, seniors. We have programs in National City, Chula Vista, but the community is also asking for more buses to run in the middle of the night, which I don't know if that's a good idea. It's not necessarily cost effective, but microtransit programs that provide door-to-door service in certain instances may be much more effective.
Yeah, and our flexible fleet program is going to have an item, I believe it's not coming till December, to really talk about what their plans are in the future, talk about the current pilots as well as future pilots. I've forwarded this, you talked to me about this earlier this week, I forwarded that to them, this concept of, because right now most of our pilots are just 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. or 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. kind of a thing, but to start considering outside of those daytime service hours.
Right. And the other thought I have is, since we're addressing equity and we have a goal of reducing health impacts in the next regional plan, can we also look at using fares or not having fares to reduce health impacts in the most impacted communities? So the way that would work is in the areas that we have either 75 percentile or higher, or maybe it's 85% or higher, diesel particulate matter counts, or one of the other measures that the Cal Environmental Screening has given us in those communities, which are along the bay and other parts of our county, we simply not have a fare. We eliminate the fare. We make it free to encourage more transit use, reduce congestion, and reduce health impacts. You want to maybe put that in the mix in terms of all your work towards the regional plan.
Yeah, noted. And we had explored, and as one of the social equity pilots, concepts of making fares free on those routes that we'd identified that we would want to, and that kind of got pushed to the side a little bit because trying to do that for a specific route is super challenging for the transit agencies. And how do you inform the public? Where is it actually free or not? Which route is free or not that day or for that hour is a lot more challenging. It's something we consider. I mean, as the system gets smarter with the ITS kind of components that we can layer in eventually, with technology, maybe that's a possibility in the future, but it is a lot more challenging.
Yeah, that's a Title VI issue also. You can't just pick and choose where you want free transportation.
Well, I think that's true. There are some other things that we'll have to look at in terms of what are the restrictions to that. Although, if you work with the Air Pollution Control District, as in South Coast Air Control District, they work another way in terms of discouraging driving during bad smog days, right? So there's different things that we have, instruments that we could work with to help things work. And with managed lanes, I imagine it's a very automated system. We may have different fares for different purposes, and perhaps when we have a serious air pollution control issue in certain parts of we can make some adjustments to encourage use of transit as opposed to driving. So I think those are things we have to work with. It's complicated, and I'm glad, Sean, you brought that up, that we've probably got a lot of rules to look at as well. Lastly, with regards to fares, I'm glad you looked at fares for the 19 to 24 age bracket. I hope we continue to consider that and not put it off the table completely, because when I turned 18, I thought that was it. You know, I was an adult. As I got older, I figured out, no, that was just a stage. There was a lot of things that happened between 18 and 24, a lot of development, and particularly in terms of how I travel and how I move. It was a period in which I learned to travel in different ways. And to me, as we get people to use transit as they're younger, going to school up to age 18, that's an important stage. But between 19 and 24, I think that's also a very important stage in which a lot of people, that's when they buy their first car or at least start driving more. And if we can affect them by giving them free access to transit, that they will continue that habit. How to fund that is going to be a question I think we have to deal with. It's a much larger price tag than the Youth Opportunity Passes. I understand that. Perhaps universities can help. Perhaps employers can help. Perhaps the Navy can help with all their sailors that of that age group. They actually get some free use of transit, but we could encourage that further, combining that with transportation demand strategies with our major employers. I hope that's in the mix of our next regional plan in terms of at least looking at that, if not piloting some systems to do that. And maybe it's saying encouragement if we just deal with the universities, do what UC San Diego is doing, but ask that San Diego State, San Diego University, all the universities, all the community colleges as well, enter into some kind of a system similar to UC San Diego. And I don't know how we can do. Well, we put it in the mix in the transportation plan in terms of possibilities, but maybe we can encourage that to happen as well. Any other comments? We're going to be finishing early. Thank you all for putting up with my issues with a lot of comments on this item. Any last comments, Brian? If not, we can end this meeting, and I'll end it with my bicycle bell again. With that, the Transportation Committee meeting is coming to an end or adjourned, but our next meeting is November 15th at 9, and we are adjourned.